You're standing in the center of the Colosseum, 50,000 bloodthirsty Romans screaming for death. Across from you stands a man who has killed more people than you've met in your entire life. His muscles are carved from years of brutal training that would hospitalize you in minutes. You think you're tough because you hit the gym 3 times a week. You think your MMA training makes you dangerous. You think modern fighters are the pinnacle of human combat prowess. You're about to discover just how catastrophically wrong you are. The gladiator facing you would dismantle your body so completely that the pieces would need to be scraped off the arena sand with a shovel. This isn't hyperbole, this is documented historical reality. Let me paint you the real picture of what a Roman gladiator actually was, because everything you think you know about these warriors is probably wrong. The gladiatorial system began in 264 BC as funeral rites for wealthy Romans. But by the time of the empire, it had evolved into the most sophisticated combat training program in human history. These weren't desperate slaves throwing themselves at death for entertainment. They were elite warriors who underwent training so intensive, it makes Navy SEAL preparation look like a weekend hobby class. At age 12, potential gladiators were selected based on specific physical and psychological criteria: height, bone, density, reaction time, pain tolerance, and most importantly, the ability to kill without hesitation. Those who made the cut were taken to Ludus schools, where they would spend the next 8 to 15 years being forged into human weapons. Take Spartacus, the most famous gladiator in history. Before his rebellion in 73 BC, he had already survived over 60 documented fights in the arena. 60, each one a life or death encounter against opponents trained specifically to kill him. Contemporary accounts describe him moving through Roman legions like a force of nature, cutting down trained soldiers with such efficiency that witnesses compared it to harvesting wheat. But Spartacus wasn't exceptional among gladiators. He was typical. Studies of gladiator remains found in Ephesus reveal bone density levels 2.3 times higher than modern athletes. Their skeletal structure shows muscle attachment points so pronounced that forensic anthropologists initially thought they were examining a different species of human. The training regimen began before dawn and ended after sunset. 6 days a week for years. While modern fighters trained for specific upcoming fights, gladiators trained continuously for combat scenarios they couldn't predict. One day they might face a net fighter, the next a heavily armored secutor, the next wild animals or multiple opponents simultaneously. Their diet was precisely calculated for maximum muscle development and bone density. Archaeological evidence shows they consumed 5,000 to 6,000 calories daily, with specific emphasis on barley, beans, and dried meat. This wasn't random nutrition. Roman physicians had developed sports science 2,000 years before modern trainers figured out protein timing. Consider the weapons training. A modern fighter learns 1 or 2 combat styles. A gladiator mastered 15 different fighting disciplines. The retiarius fought with net and trident. The murmillo used sword and shield. The Dimachus wielded 2 swords simultaneously. Each style required years to master, and every gladiator was expected to be competent in multiple disciplines. Everything you think you know about gladiator combat from Hollywood is wrong. The reality is far more terrifying. These weren't lumbering brutes swinging heavy weapons clumsily. They were surgical killers who could end a fight in seconds when they chose to. Arena records show the average gladiator bout lasted between 3 and 8 minutes, not because they were evenly matched, but because they were trained to provide entertainment before delivering the killing blow. The psychological conditioning was perhaps more intense than the physical training. From childhood, they were desensitized to violence and death through gradual exposure. By adulthood, taking a human life triggered no emotional response whatsoever. Modern military studies show it takes months of psychological conditioning to prepare soldiers for combat. Gladiators lived in that mental state permanently. Archaeological evidence from gladiator graveyards reveals the brutal effectiveness of their training. Bone analysis shows that the average gladiator suffered and recovered from 4.7 major injuries during their career. These weren't minor cuts. We're talking about bone fractures, deep sword wounds, and injuries that would permanently disable modern athletes. They not only survived these injuries, but returned to peak fighting condition. Roman medical texts describe surgical procedures developed specifically for gladiator injuries that weren't rediscovered by modern medicine until the 19th century. They had developed advanced techniques for treating severed tendons, shattered bones, and internal bleeding because gladiator injuries pushed the boundaries of what the human body could survive. The medical facilities at major ludus schools rivaled modern trauma centers in their sophistication. Roman physicians could perform complex joint reconstructions, nerve repairs, and even primitive brain surgery to treat head trauma from combat. They understood anatomy at a level that European medicine wouldn't reach again until the Renaissance. Gladiator survival rates from injuries that would be fatal without modern antibiotics and surgical equipment exceeded 70%. Consider the sheer mental fortitude required to continue fighting after sustaining multiple life-threatening injuries. Modern athletes retire from single torn ligaments. Gladiators returned to combat after having their rib cage crushed, their sword arm shattered, or their face permanently disfigured. Pain tolerance levels measured through bone scarring analysis indicate they could function normally with injuries that would incapacitate any modern person. But here's what makes this truly terrifying for any modern person. The mental framework of a gladiator was fundamentally different from yours. You've been conditioned by modern society to value human life, to hesitate before causing harm, to show mercy. These psychological safeguards that make you a decent human being would get you killed instantly in the arena. A Roman gladiator felt no hesitation, no moral conflict, no emotional attachment to preserving life. When they decided to kill, they acted with the same casual efficiency you use to swat a fly. The neurological pathways that cause modern people to freeze or hesitate in violent situations had been systematically severed through years of conditioning. Contemporary. Accounts describe gladiators killing with such mechanical precision that spectators compared it to watching craftsmen at work. No wasted motion, no emotional display, just the methodical application of lethal technique. This wasn't rage or bloodlust. This was professional competence applied to ending human life. The physical specifications are equally devastating to modern confidence. Analysis of gladiator equipment reveals that their standard sword weighed between 2.1 and 2.8 pounds, but they could wield it continuously for hours without fatigue. Modern fencers using swords half that weight experience muscle failure after 20 minutes of intensive sparring. Their shield techniques were so advanced that experimental archaeology has shown a trained gladiator could deflect arrows shot from compound bows at ranges where modern soldiers would require ballistic armor. The leather and bronze construction of their shields, combined with their technique, provided protection equivalent to modern body armor while maintaining complete mobility. Even their basic physical capabilities would humiliate modern athletes. Biomechanical analysis of arena floor wear patterns indicates gladiators could maintain sprint speeds while carrying 40 to 60 pounds of equipment. Olympic sprinters carrying no additional weight couldn't match the sustained speed of an armored gladiator during combat. The grip strength required to wield their weapons effectively has been calculated at over 200 pounds per square inch. Modern strongmen, training specifically for grip strength, average 150 pounds per square inch. A gladiator's casual handshake would crush the bones in your hand. Their cardiovascular conditioning defied human limitations. Heart rate analysis based on skeletal muscle development suggests gladiators could maintain peak combat intensity for over an hour without significant performance degradation. Modern elite fighters experience severe fatigue after 15 minutes of high-intensity combat. The gladiator cardiovascular system had adapted to sustain lethal efficiency throughout extended battles. Reaction time studies based on weapon wear, patterns, and defensive positioning show response times averaging 0.12 seconds from stimulus to action. Elite modern athletes average 0.18 seconds. In combat, those extra 0.06 seconds represent the difference between life and death. Your nervous system simply cannot process and respond to threats fast enough to survive against a gladiator's attacks. The deadliest muscle fiber composition in Gladiator remains shows an unprecedented combination of explosive power and endurance capability. Modern athletes typically excel in either power or endurance, but not both. Gladiators possessed muscle architecture that delivered maximum force output while maintaining that output indefinitely. This biological advantage alone would make them unbeatable in any physical confrontation. You wouldn't last 30 seconds against a Roman gladiator. Not 30 minutes, not 3 minutes. 30 seconds. In that time, they would have assessed your stance, identified your weaknesses, closed the distance, and delivered a killing blow, with such precision that you wouldn't understand what had happened until you were already dead. Your modern training has taught you to fight according to rules, to show restraint, to protect yourself from injury. A gladiator would exploit every single one of these civilized instincts to destroy you. While you're still trying to process the situation, they would have already ended the fight. You're standing face to face with the ultimate expression of human combat capability, a weapon forged through decades of the most brutal training ever devised, and your modern sensibilities are nothing but weakness to be exploited. The screaming crowd isn't cheering for you. They're anticipating your destruction.